Hey, all, welcome back to another episode of the Making Strides podcast. How's it going, Adam?
It's going okay. You guys get
Yep.
much snow up there?
Just a couple inches last week and then like half an inch last night or something. I just ran around the local park here and it's pretty much just like packed snow, some uneven sections on the less traveled stuff, but otherwise very runnable. And I'm glad the trails are back open because they were closed all the way up until um, with the last melt all the way up until just recently when we had the snowfall, which opened up the trails. So um, happy they're open again. But how about
Nice.
you?
Yeah, we got about the same amount of snow. Actually went out this morning to shovel because I had somebody at 8,
Mhm.
and half an hour later, it like really started coming down. It's like, what a waste of time.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Love it.
but it was good.
Yep,
Um, yeah, so just crazy Colorado snow. It's good to get snow. We've been super dry.
totally. Yeah, for sure.
Always we
And
sit in trouble with like Pikes Peak, and like it gets dumped on and then we get nothing. So it's good.
yeah, I pretty much hate the cold and the snow, and I don't like the argument that, oh, it's moisture. We need the moisture. I would so much rather not getting the snow, not get the snow, and then we just get some good rain in the spring. I think there's actually a statistic out there. We should have asked Brad when we had him on. So he was an atmospheric scientist we had on like 2 podcasts ago. So check that out if you're interested. But basically, I saw a stat somewhere that like an inch of rain is like a crap ton more beneficial from a like drought perspective than like an inch of snow or what, or the same amount of moisture of snow or something like that. I don't know. I'm butchering it, but so it supports my argument and my hatred of the cold snow. So I like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get the
Let's
ball
jump
rolling
in.
here.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I was saying what you were saying. Like let's get going. Let's jump
Oh,
in.
perfect. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to do a little bit of like a mix and match, some common questions we've been getting recently again. And so we'll go there. We're super down for doing more focused kind of deep dive podcasts on a specific topic with like we've usually done. And so we just, we're kind of perfectionists. We want to get it right and we want it to be a topic that's interesting. So I'll just preface by saying if you have any sort of suggestions for anything like that we haven't covered, please let us know. We both have a way for you to submit questions on our websites, and then also just reach out by whatever means is easiest for you. So for today, we'll start with something that I hinted at the end of last podcast episode that I wanted to touch on, but we wanted to kind of do it justice. So we wanted to talk about what is the appropriate timeline for returning to training post race. Mainly, my biggest kind of like soapbox and grudge and issue being with how most people approach coming back from a marathon or beyond. So like ultra marathons and stuff like that. So we can definitely extrapolate downward and talk briefly about a couple of shorter distance races and stuff like that too. But so let's just start off. I guess marathon is the middle ground, probably, because there's not like a whole ton of, in the grand scheme of things, ultra running is a fairly niche. Although probably in our circles around here in Colorado, it's not so much. But I mean, it's bigger, it's more popular. So, but then again, it's just nothing in comparison to the what is it called? The participation size of running basically like 5K to half marathon. So, with that said, how do we want to do this? Do you want to go top to bottom? Actually, I feel like starting with marathon is not the way to do this. I feel like we should go top to bottom or bottom to top.
Okay. Well then if we're gonna go top to bottom, so start ultra and come down. Because I think with the shorter stuff, it's more of just a perspective change than like you had this really huge event that was really demanding for your body, and we need to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're gonna start at ultra, I'll let you take the lead because
Okay.
that's where your wheelhouse. And then if we want to flip it at the marathon. I can kind of hash out my typical approach or kind of general rule to follow.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'll just start with my little soapbox, I guess. And I've gotten this question quite a lot, and every time I come back from a race, a big race, an ultra, all my patients and people I interact with on a daily basis are always like, "Hey, I'm just curious, like, what are you doing right now, or like, what is your um, kind of return to training protocol look like, your reverse taper, whatever else people call it?" And so, um, I think, I think more or less we can treat like 50 to 100 mile kind of like efforts fairly similarly, um, in terms of like, generally speaking, we could put them in the same bucket, like what we're going to do. Okay. When it comes to like 50K or like heavy marathon plus kind of races, or like a marathon with like 8,000 feet of climbing in the mountains, right? Where we kind of consider that like borderline ultra, right? Because it's taking the average person like 8 hours plus. So those types of races, maybe we can get back a little bit sooner. But my soapbox piece is, obviously I'm on Strava, and obviously like I'm plugged into a lot of online communities and things like that. And I see people who just ran their heart out at like a 50-mile race, and Siri is trying to, hopefully that's not interfering with my microphone. Okay, I turned her off. Um, but basically I see them right at like literally like 3 days after a 50-mile race where they crushed it, right? Like podiumed at like some local big 50-mile or something like that. And like 3 days later, they feel the need to go run 5 miles on the bike path at like 8-minute pace. Okay. And I'm just like, why? Like, I don't even know, like what's a risk comparison? I don't know. It would be like, oh, let me jump off this building and try to roll out of it. Oh, because it's fun and I feel like I need to do it. I don't care about the injury. Like, that's what the equivalent is, right? Like, can you jump off like a 1-story building onto, let's just call it grass? And like, would you want to do that? No, like the risk of injury is too high. Okay, this is like the equivalent. Okay, the risk of injury is so high at that point doing something like that. Like, why do you feel like you need to do it? Okay. So I'll let Adam chime in here, so I'm not talking a whole ton, but I think that the main reasons why runners feel like they need to do this, I think there's probably three. So social pressure. Okay. And just a lot of us run to be social, and we want to we just want to go out and run and see our running friends and not miss the local group run because we feel kind of better 3 days later or whatever. That's number one. Number two is I think this is probably like the biggest one, but like a lot of people are afraid they're going to lose fitness when they like take any time off of running. Okay. So I think when I'm like, oh, you should take like a solid 7 days, zero running whatsoever, at least. And then, and we'll get into what the actual kind of usual protocol is. But when people hear that, they're like, what, really? Are you serious? And you're not going to get slower. You're not going to lose fitness. And then I'm kind of blanking on where my brain was going with that third one. But it was mainly like social pressure, fear of like losing fitness, and boredom or something like that is what I was thinking about. Like, runners just need to do a better job identifying with other aspects of their life. A lot of times we're just too entrenched in being runners. And I think that the time after a race is a good time to like, branch out and just stoke some of those other interests that make up your identity, other than just running. But I mean, besides those three major things, Adam, I mean, why else do you feel like runners, and have you seen that as well, like runners just jumping back in after an ultra or even a marathon like 3-4 days later?
Definitely. And when I even some of my own athletes, I've seen, like, I'm like, hey, we're just gonna take a week, like, you have free reins, get in some walks, whatever, move around, like, move your body, but let's not run. And I'll see, like, towards the end of the week, it might be short, my 20-30 minutes, whatever, a run pop in up on Funnel Surge, like, let's, so you got to run in, and like, that's all I'll respond with, like, yeah, I just felt really good. It's like, okay. And that's
Yeah.
the pushback I'll get sometimes, like, oh, I just felt really good. I wanted to get out. It's like,
Mhm.
I mean, I hope that works out for us, but like, I'm kind of like nervous for like the next 2 weeks that we got into it, a little early.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's the biggest thing kind of I've
Yeah.
seen.
I mean, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm saying 3 or 4 days, but I have seen worse. I have seen people try run like 2 days after a 100 miler. Like, I've seen crazy things. Okay, please don't be that person. Okay, your respiratory system even showed, like, there are studies that show these are more recent studies. Was it Nick Tiller? I can't remember. Anyway, there were some studies that showed respiratory fatigue. Okay, like your respiratory, like your lungs aren't even working right. Your nervous system, nervous system fatigue, muscular fatigue, your bones, I'm sure, like, just everything is not functioning appropriately. Okay, you probably have tons of inflammation in your body. You probably have tons of like micro breakdown. And here's the thing too, like, if you've run an ultra, you understand how horrible your body can feel the next day. Okay, it is massively destructively horrible sometimes. Okay, now 2 days later you may feel like things are so much better, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that they're probably still pretty bad. Even if you feel a lot better, right? The nervous system does some funny things sometimes. So just keep that in mind. Okay, but anyway, we can get a little bit more into like what to actually do here, I guess, unless Adam, you have any other thoughts there. I can step off my soapbox.
No, I was thinking about hitting it a little bit with kind of marathon stuff anyway, which I would anticipate it probably looks relatively similar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have anything else to say, I'll just jump into kind of marathon.
Well, yeah, and so what I would actually do or prescribe for ultra, coming back from an ultra, is I would say more like 50K to 50K to 50 mile ish. You probably want at least 5 to 7 days 0% running. And this is going to vary depending on the person, depending on your experience level, depending on how hard you ran, depending on how many thousands of feet of vertical ascent and descent was part of this race, how technical the race was, how muddy or snowy, all of these types of things. Okay, so there is no protocol for this. There's no calculation. We just have to use sensible decision making. And so in general, 5 to 7 days for like a 50K to 50 mile of no running whatsoever. That same amount of time of no running, probably from 100K to 100 mile plus, becomes 10 to 14 days. Okay, of 0% running. Then after that 0% running phase is over, we want to do non-consecutive days of running that are actually probably starting with run walks. Okay, I never start, like, we use this protocol a lot, and I usually start somewhere. Usually do like level 3 or level 5 or something like that. So basically like 3 minutes running, 1 minute walk, 3 minutes running, 1 minute walk. You do a nice walking warm up, nice walking cool down. I've done as much as down to, you just got to feel it out. If you don't feel great, you can still get out there, do a run walk, but maybe level 1 or level 2, which is 1-to-1 ratio, like 2 minutes on, 2 minutes walk, something like that. Anyway, you want to do that for probably like at least 3 runs, non-consecutive days. So probably like another week. Okay, you want to do at least 2 of those. See how your body's feeling. Okay, and then after that, we start like a normal reverse taper kind of situation where you're probably going to be at like 50%, 30 to 50% your training volume the week after that, and then maybe like 50 to 70% the week after that, and so on. That's it, and it's just going to depend on how you feel. But anyway, so that's kind of like a general protocol. Adam?
Yeah, I follow a very similar thing for the marathon. Week 1 is nothing. Again, go for some walks, do some mobility stuff, move your body, that's great. Helps facilitate that recovery process. I think doing absolutely nothing, just laying on the couch for a week is not a good idea either.
Yeah, and I definitely tell people to do walks. Like I definitely
Mhm.
want everybody going for a walk. Like we want to constantly be testing how our body feels. And the best way to do that on like days 1 to 2 and 3 after a race are probably just walking around the house. If we're talking about an ultra, you could go for like maybe a little bit around the neighborhood or something like that. But then after that, like the rest of your 0% running phase should be a lot of walking, progressively getting brisker and more continuous with the walking as that time goes on. Anyway, sorry.
Definitely. Yeah. So then week 2, we're looking at 3 days of running. Usually that first one, very small amount, similar to what you're saying, 3 to 5 minute bouts with some walking. And then it's maybe, 6, 8, 10 minute bouts. And then it's not until the end of week 2, depending on how you feel, maybe even week 3, that it's a continuous sustained run. And then we spend the next 4 weeks, give or take, building up to your prior level of volume and frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all, no workouts, nothing intense, very, very chill stuff, just building back that capacity. Then we can layer in like what's next for us. What's our next thing we're going to work towards?
Yep.
So I've seen that take as much as 6 weeks, actually, if somebody really gets after it in the marathon, and maybe we were coming off an injury at the start of the build and we weren't able to get up to where we'd really ideally like to be, if all things were perfect, and so it maybe beat us up a little bit more. But
Yep.
generally, from race day, 4 to 8 weeks.
Yep. And I mean, the next day after, I don't even care what your race is. Like if you can tolerate sitting on a bike saddle, you could probably do a light spin. That's not a big deal. So just to be clear there. But once again, you want to think to yourself like, hey, what's the purpose here? If it's literally just circulating blood, it's probably, and like loosening up, it's probably a good thing. It's probably fine. And then strength training is another question too, where if somebody is following a preferred product, like preferred strength training kind of plan, where they're doing some pretty heavy, fairly intense lifting, assuming this is in season, because we're talking about recovering from races, typically intensity is high, volume of intensity is low. And so we typically just also, at least during that 0% running time, I typically don't have them do any sort of intense lifting either. And we do just a little bit of a kind of like couple of workouts to get back up to intensity there. Maybe like 2 weeks to get back to intensity with the lifting.
Yeah, it's not quite as drawn out.
But you may not feel as strong for weeks after that. Like, especially if we're talking like 100K, 100 mile, like you're going to be feeling that for a long time. God, I wish we looked up the study before we hopped on here, but I remember there was a study about marathon recovery, like biochemical, maybe it went into biochemistry. I don't know. There were aspects of recovery that I think 3 months down the road were still off from after a marathon. So just know that no matter how good you feel, I really, it doesn't matter how good you feel. You're going to definitely still be recovering for a long while. And I don't want your realization of that being like tripping off a tendinopathy or something like that.
Yeah.
Like AKA getting injured.
Bad news.
Okay. So we moved to like half marathon.
Yeah, I think even half marathon might be a little bit of a gray zone, probably depending on your history of running and
Yep.
how hard you hammered it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've definitely I've only run a few half marathons and I've like really gone after it. And I've taken a similar protocol as what we would do for something longer. But I've also, I can go out and just run 13 miles and run the next day. That would not be a big deal. Again, it depends. But if we want to just kind of, in light of time here, because I do have a coaching call right after this, if we just want to condense like half marathon and down, I think what's important to think about that is different than marathon and beyond, where we're thinking about race day, is that you've had this long season doing a lot of hard efforts that is cumulative, that mentally, physically, it is good to step away from that and let your body kind of refresh. I mean, you don't just want to go hammering all the time, and if we're going that short a distance, I mean, you could be going twice a week, every single week. That's realistic if you're that level of runner, which is something I would be doing, at least most of the time. And it takes a toll on you, not quite in the same way, but you can definitely feel it mentally more than anything, and you're ready for a break. So stepping away from that is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think, yeah, just being concise with some sort of like actionable protocol with recovery, moving downward. I think that 0% running phase could be like 3 to 5 days for a half marathon, just depending on how hard and how much experience you went. And then anything shorter than that, you're probably, if you feel okay, like you could probably start to listen to how you feel and judge when you should, like when we're talking about shorter than a half marathon, it's very likely that if you feel okay, you can probably run as long as you're making sensible decisions, right? So I would probably not do, I'd probably skip a week of intensity. I wouldn't try and do like a track workout the week after a couple 5 days after a 5K or something like that. You can, just depending, right? Because you have kids in high school who are in college who are competing like multiple times a week, and they can get away with it, but to what end, to what risk? Anyway, so you can listen. Point being, you could probably listen to your body a little bit more in those shorter distances, whereas there are some deeper, below the surface, complex recovery patterns that are unfolding. Marathon to ultra, sometimes half marathon if you hammed it. So
yeah,
you agree?
sure. Yeah, definitely. And just to hit on one more time, like it's okay to not always be at like your 100% fitness and speed, especially in those shorter ones where that's like the priority. Like you want to be that fast all the time, but you really can't do that year round. Like it's not a good setup for you to try to do that. So we need different phases, different blocks. We need to periodize kind of our training, what we're really striving for. So that when you come back next winter, if you're doing indoor, next outdoor, whatever kind of it is, you have that next 6 to 9 months. Like, how can you facilitate going faster then by doing something different now?
Totally. Absolutely. Cool. So I feel like that wraps that pretty well.
I agree. Yeah.
Did you want to touch on the other topic right now, or
yeah, why not? Let's do it.
okay, we can do a quick and dirty version if there's interest.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to ask the question? Because I think you had it geared a little bit towards me.
Yeah, so I was discussing with an athlete last night, who's getting ready for a 60K that is mostly downhill until the end. And then there's some climbing. And they really want to run 18 miles in this build up. So I'm kind of hesitant because it's going to take them beyond 3 hours of continuous running to get there. And last November, I saw them on the rehab side for some ITB related stuff, which happened after doing rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, with those symptoms being elicited around 16 to 18. So that's part of where that comes from, is just there's a fear of that marker, of that happening again for this race. So it's kind of that question of how long do we need this to be successful on race day? And what is the risk of going beyond that, but maybe gaining a lot of confidence from that?
Yeah, so the benefits are going to be, we got to think, I stole this from Sean Bearden, but we talk about the mind, the body, and the craft when we're trying to prep ourselves for a race, right? And so the mind, obviously, psychology and confidence and things like that. The body is physiologic benefits and fitness and strength and whatever. And the craft being like, okay, is my pack working, and my nutrition and hydration strategy, and am I going to use poles and like pacing myself up and down hills, and whatever. So stuff like that. So basically, we want somebody to be prepared in the ultra realm on all three fronts: mind, body, and craft. And so in this specific situation, from a mind perspective, has he ever gone, like he did rim to rim to rim, so he has done ultra distance efforts.
This is a she, by the way.
So she's done ultra distance efforts before, correct? Okay, so that's big, but unless they've done a lot of them, they may just feel like they need to do more of that, like checking off that they're okay going longer kind of thing. So that's a confidence thing. In this woman's particular scenario, it might be a huge psychological block for her not having run longer than that 18-ish or 16 to 18-ish mile marker, where she knows she has, like you said, she's had IT band symptoms around that mark ever since rim to rim to rim in the past. Okay. So she may be looking for confirmation of, hey, can I even, like, I don't want to be 18 miles into this race. And that's like probably 38 miles or so. And 37, something like that. I don't want to be halfway through this race, less than half, and feel like I have IT band symptoms coming on. Okay. So I felt the same way. I had major IT band issues after Quad Rock 50 2 years ago, and I was signed up for a 60K, and I was having right around that, like I was using hours, but like right around that 3 hour mark, 2.5 hour mark, I was starting to have increasing IT band pain, and it was a huge mental weight off my back when I broke through and was able to start running 3.5 to 4 hours without IT band pain. It was huge. So she may be looking for that kind of clearance. Another thing, so then from a craft perspective, like, we don't know how well her nutrition hydration strategy is going to play out right now beyond 3 hours. So it is important on that front to make sure that what she has been practicing and what she's going to execute on race day actually works for her beyond a 2.5, 3 hour mark, right? Because it's probably going to take her, I don't know how fit this, I don't know anything about her, but I'm going to guess like 8 to 10 hours or something like that. So those are the main things. When it comes to distance, it's very, very based on how many long runs does this person have under their belt in their career and how consistently. So experience. Okay. Like, I can go out and run, like last weekend, just did 4 hours without basically batting an eye. So, and that's because I have a ton of consistency and long runs under my belt. And somebody else, that may wreck them. So, and that doesn't mean you don't do them. It means we have to strategize them, especially if they are planning on doing ultras. They need to be able to, in a controlled training scenario, do occasionally longer long runs. But we need to realize that the longer a long run is, especially when we start hitting, depending on how much walking and hiking and intensity wise, depending on that, somewhere in the 3 to 3.5 hour mark, maybe if you were going pretty intensely, like 2.5 hours to 3 hours, but usually 3 to 3.5 hours, we're starting to see a significant like point of diminishing returns of your aerobic benefit. Okay. And then an increase or spike in injury risk and recovery burden. Okay. So that's not a good combination of things. So the longer you make the long run, the more you're gambling on that for less and less gain. Okay. So that needs to be something that people pay attention to, and a lot of people don't know about that and think about that. But other than that, I would say this far out. So I have a last thing I'll say, because we have just like 2 minutes left, but and I'll let you chime in too. But I have one of my coaching clients is also training. He's training for the 100K Black Canyons as well, just the longer distance of it. And he did his longest long run this past weekend. So, but obviously he's doing the 100K and he did 5 hours. So but he's also very experienced. So it just depends on the person, you know?
Definitely. History, I think, plays the biggest factor.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest reservation is just our starting point, and that because of the IT band stuff, we've gotten, or I started with her, start of January pretty much. So we only really got up to about 2 hours at that point. So, how big of a jump do we really want to make, and how much is that worth it at that point? That's kind of where she was expressing, like, I really feel like I need to do this, and I think it's going to take more than 3 hours. Like, I think you're right. But here's kind of the risk reward we're getting from that. So we had, kind of a discussion about that, where I think we're going to end up is where we run the 3 hours. She has a few people she's going to run with, and she has a route, and it's very runnable. So she'll probably run for 3 hours continuously, and then just briskly walk the rest of the distance. So we kind of have a compromise there, where she's going to hit that mile marker, which I think she's going to have less than 2 miles to walk by the time she's 3 hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll be pretty close. It's not going to be that much. So she gets to hit that distance. I get to feel comfortable about how we're getting there. And I think it'll be a big win for her. And then we have a couple, which we'll save this for another day. We have another longer run the next day.
So we're going to talk about back-to-backs, but we'll save that. Yeah.
We'll save that.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be good, but I wanted to give kind of,
and that's 3 weeks out. This upcoming weekend will be 3 weeks out. Yeah. And so I'd just be careful there, just because, some fairly stable, consistent, strong runners can definitely do a big long run 3 weeks out from a big race. But typically we want that more, 4 weeks, 5 weeks out for runners where we are more concerned about those things.
Our first week, so it was, I think, 7 weeks out. We had a little, like a 3-day, we really hit this hard and got a lot of volume in 3 days, kind of like a training camp, so to speak. So it won't be our first time visiting kind of that area. But she wanted one more for
perfect.
For her.
It's fine. Best of luck to her. Awesome. I know I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll end things now because you have a coaching call in like 1 minute. So anyway, we'll touch on back-to-back long runs and stuff like that in the future too. And then other than that, let us know what else you guys want to talk about. Cool. Well, everybody, go make some strides. Adam, do you have anything else? You looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh no, I was just gonna make sure the strides in.
Yeah, go make some strides. Okay, see you guys.